Bases dropped on a lovely Tuesday morning in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a little hot, but it's nice. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday Thoughts edition of Soccer Down here. We'll be getting into what you guys are thinking about this morning. We'll also get into some Campeones Cup and the importance of it, or lack thereof, depending on your take. We will talk to Chris Fuhrmeister of Pro Soccer USA. He has a piece that has just gone up at The Guardian with Frank DeBoer. So we'll talk to Chris, get his takes on that and everything else that happened over the weekend. But as we do on Tuesdays, let's go back through the absolute ridiculousness of the MLS weekend that was. Because it was one of the most ridiculous we've seen this season, John. And it started with an absolutely ridiculous game in Seattle.
I was going to say, yes, it did.
That was the first one, and it was a 3-3 game that, I mean, we could go a million different directions coming out of this. Where do you want to start?
Well, I was just going to say it could have been 5-5. You want to start at the end and work your way backward?
Let's actually start with what Jeff Lemieux, who is part of the Revs organization on the comms side. Jeff is a senior staff writer and editor for the New England Revolution. His tweet afterwards, Bruce Arena said he had absolutely no idea how to even comment on today's wild 3-3 draw. From the back-and-forth nature of the whole game to several video reviews to a late equalizer from the spot, he called it, quote, a game of accidents and a blank S blank blank T show.
A shot show?
Yeah, you go on believing that.
A soot show?
You go on believing that. I think you know Bruce
show.
Better than that. Anyway.
Yeah, and when you look at Harry Shipp scoring 2 minutes in, you're sitting there going, okay, it's going to go this way. And then 2 goals 8 minutes apart. Michael Mancien. I when I saw that pop up, I was like, really? Okay.
Why?
So, man, when was the last time he scored?
He's been injured. He's a defender.
That's what I'm saying. He's a defender. I was looking at the defender point of view.
And this was a big part of the talking point, though, was Mancien's been out for a while. You're trying to get him back into the mix. New England actually shifted to a 3-5-2, 5-3-2 to get Mancien back in. It's not something that they've typically played. It worked. It had a great effect. Mancien, look, if New England's going to go anywhere and you're committing the resources that you are to Mancien in terms of salary, he's going to have to perform for you. And he gets a goal here, which is great. That's not what you're paying him for. You're paying him to defend, and, well, he gave up 3 goals. But you've got to get that part sorted out, or this team is not going where they think they can.
And you got a 2-1 lead, and then as you're watching, the field, legitimately, it was bang, bang. It's like by the time you're out of the replay of the Harry Shipp second goal, Ladero's down on the right-hand side again, scores again to make it 3-2, and then heel from the spot in the 87th. So, yeah, it was a seat show, guaranteed. And there's a lot of things that both teams, I think, can take from it that they've got to go back onto the training pitch and sort out, and look at the overhead projectors and sort out, too. It was definitely what Bruce Arena said for a bunch of different reasons.
Did a bunch of video reviews and weird referee things here. There was a goal pulled back at the end of the first half. It looked like New England had scored again to go up 3-1. I think it was the right call. Gustavo Bo, I thought Stefan Fry got enough of the possession to be fouled in that situation. I didn't think it was a loose ball. It was a really tight decision. I think they got it right. Bruce Arena disagreed, and he talked about it at halftime. It's New England getting the result ultimately after all of the craziness. They're going to be happy with that. Seattle giving up points again at home. A little bit to be concerned about here.
Yeah, and that's the other part of this whole thing. I think that you know that if you're going into a difficult environment like that and you come out with a point, obviously that's a big positive for New England. But once again, you're giving up 2 at home if you're Seattle. And so it's a time for introspection. And I guess that's my big word for the early part of the show, is that, you got to look inside, you got to figure it out, because the fortress that we all thought Soto Mojo was hasn't been that way recently, and you got to flip it toward the tail end of the season, especially if you're going to do anything in the playoffs.
Bobby Warshaw had some good points in his 24 takeaways column. Seattle has 9 of their last 10 against playoff teams. 6 of those last 10 are on the road. The next 3 games are all on the road: RSL, Galaxy, Portland. And this is the most important one because this simplifies all of it. Seattle started the season 5-0-1. Since then, 6-7-3.
Kind of pedestrian, isn't it?
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. I think they have more talent than to be pedestrian. They are in second in the Western Conference on 39 points at 11-7-6 overall. They're 1 point ahead of Minnesota, 1 point ahead of San Jose, 2 points ahead of LA Galaxy, 2 points ahead of Real Salt Lake, 3 points ahead of FC Dallas. That gets you to 7th place. Oh, yeah, the Portland Timbers are in 8th on 34 points, and they have like 10 home games left. So, Seattle, while they're thinking about hosting a playoff game, I think they also have to look at 8th place and being on the outside looking in. So, we will keep an eye on what happens with Seattle because they've got to change it up a little bit. Let's talk about Hell is Real for a bit here. Columbus and Cincinnati, 2-2 draw. Entertaining. I mean, not a great match in terms of overall quality, but a very entertaining rivalry match. Cincinnati goes up 2-0. Columbus comes back to get it to 2-2. Could have went either way in the final minutes. Jossie's artist, what we thought was just a horrendous miss right in front, actually was good defensive work from Kendall Waston. He gets a piece of it. It's I don't think we learned anything about either of the teams. Neither one's a playoff team in my book. Neither one is all that great, but you get to see what this rivalry can be.
And some of the new faces that are now a part of FC Cincinnati got some run. Derek Etienne got 26. Joe Giao got 27. Przemysław Tytoń, for his 4-save performance, was actually a part of Team of the Week. So good for Tytoń in a season that has been musical chairs basically between the sticks for FC Cincinnati. But just under 21,000 showing up for this one. And I think they're hooking up again in a couple of weeks. But yeah, we've seen what it can be in Open Cup, and this was that first look at what it can be in MLS, and I think that it can be entertaining on its own levels right now, considering where both teams are in the standings.
Another draw, Toronto, 1-1 with Orlando. This feels like a big point for Orlando coming after Open Cup disappointment and a very disappointing home draw for Toronto.
No doubt. And you'd like to think that, and it took almost 70 minutes for the first goal to be put on the board. And if you get wrapped up in team stats, that first goal wasn't yours. You had to come from behind, and you scored 8 minutes later with 13 to go, and it was Patrick Mullins who did it. But you look at the numbers, and it was somewhat tilted when it comes to shooting for Toronto. But just because you outshoot somebody by 10, you have 3 more shots on target. That means that you had a lot more shots off target. And to me, this one, good on Orlando for dusting yourself off after the midweek and going in and getting what you got, considering you start Dom Dwyer and he puts in 78. Okay. But for me, good point for Orlando, and I just continue to scratch my head about Toronto FC and what they think they are, what they think they should be, and what we end up seeing at the end of the day.
They're just not that good. I mean,
no.
It just comes down to that. They've lost their balance, and that's the biggest thing when I think back to the 2017 Toronto team that won everything and look at them now. They don't have the balance. They don't have, okay, you want to dominate possession, you want to push forward, you want to get numbers forward, cool, ball turns over. All all right, you're going to be fine. You don't have that. You don't have Drew Moore calling the shots on a regular basis. Chris Mavinga had a really good second half to the season in 2017. He hasn't hit those heights on a regular basis since. It's just not there. Omar Gonzalez is going to have to be better. I think you're at a point where you've got some serious decisions to make about Michael Bradley and what you're going to do with him. You know, we've talked about it with the national team. I think to get the best out of him, you need to pair him with somebody. And too often it's Bradley in front of the center backs. I thought Warshaw had a great breakdown on it, although I do disagree with one part of it. You can't leave Michael Bradley in that spot anymore. When you get the outside backs forward like they want to do, and it's Bradley hanging out in front of the center backs, that's all you have left. That's how you're going to defend a counterattack. Warshaw says Bradley and Omar Gonzalez can't cover that type of ground anymore. And then in parentheses he says, though I'm not sure if it's can't or won't. I disagree with the won't. I think that's a shot. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't think they can. I just don't think they can. I don't think either one is a guy who's not going to work hard. I don't think they have that ability anymore. So you've got to figure out, do you want to sacrifice and play Delgado or Osorio? I would go Delgado or maybe somebody else, depending on what else you have on the roster, with Bradley and protect a little bit more. You should have enough attacking talent to not have to be that aggressive going forward. I don't know, but it's not working.
No. And, you know, we've always had the quote that there's one married couple that's undefeated in life, and that's Father Time and Mother Nature. And when Father Time catches up with you, sometimes it's a lot faster than you want. And it just looks like...
Let's go back. No, I disagree with that. That's not the issue.
All right.
No, it's not the issue. You can't... Bradley wasn't a guy that you wanted to play in that role necessarily anyway all the time. It wasn't Michael Bradley's range that made it work in 2017. It was Chris Mavinga as a center back who made it work. Michael Bradley wasn't a guy who, as the 6, when he changed to the 6. Now, when he played as an 8, different conversation altogether. But when he became the 6, I don't like that setup. I didn't like it in Seattle where they would leave Osvaldo Alonso by himself and he'd get exposed. What did they do to solve it? Christian Roldan started running for him and playing next to him and covering ground for him. It's exactly what Toronto needs to do. It's not just Father Time. At some point, because this is August of 2019, Toronto was at their best at the end of 2017.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot to write home about last year. They did have injuries, but they also didn't figure anything out with those injuries. They didn't figure anything out with the players who had to play in place of those players. They haven't figured anything out this year. They're 9, 10, and 6.
So let me ask you something.
If Father Time was the issue, that happened a long time ago. That's not an excuse anymore.
Let me ask you this. How much of this is on Greg Vanney and his lineup ideas and his patterns?
I think it has to be at this point, right? I mean, the rotations at times are completely and utterly baffling when you look at the lineups that Vanney throws out there. I think he's thrown points away because of that at times, and that's a massive issue. You've changed goalkeepers this year. I'm okay with that. Omar Gonzalez and Chris Mavinga as your center backs right now. You played a 4-4-2 with Tsubasa Endo on the right side, who has generally been a forward. Pozuelo dropping in behind Josie Altidore. You did not start with Jonathan Osorio in this game. You did not start with either of your two new wingers, Gallardo or Benezet. I don't know what's going on anymore in Toronto, and I go back to what we've said all season. If they don't make the playoffs, I think they're going to make a change. There's too many questions about how things have been handled. I don't know. I'm not getting it. And then you do have to make a decision on Michael Bradley, because if you're going to bring him back and he's played well enough for you to deserve to be brought back, you're going to have to change the way you use him. I think you're going to have to play two holding midfielders, sit a little bit deeper. You want him on the ball, but you want him as a deep-lying playmaker, essentially. All right. You're gonna if you want him and you're going to pay him, you're going to have to try to get the best out of him. And I don't think right now they're doing that. So let's go to Minnesota and Dallas. Another bonkers game, 5-3.
Yeah.
Dallas gets 2 goals late, 85th minute. Go ahead and 90+3 sealer from Brandon Cervania, young homegrown player. Minnesota rotated their squad a bit. Minnesota was coming off of an emotional Open Cup semifinal win. Big win for Dallas here, though.
No doubt. And Manone still started. You had a lineup for Minnesota that included, as I'm buzzing through it, Rasmus Schuler put in 86, Ibarra, Olam, Finley, Colin Martin, Boxall, Dotson, Manley, Coleman. So there was some there. Abu Dinladi came in for a cup of coffee. Quintero came in for a cup of coffee. Mason Toy came in for a cup of coffee. And there was some stuff on the pitch that...
Well, then Mason Toy spit in his cup of coffee, which is just
Yes.
ridiculous. Absolutely
Yes.
disgusting. He needs to be suspended for a couple of games minimum. It's
Mhm.
no place. No place for that.
Nope.
He's got to have a pretty lengthy suspension here.
And props to his teammates for instantly
Absolutely.
jumping on him for doing it.
Absolutely.
So,
no point.
Good
that's-
self-policing there on the field.
For me, that's the same as punching somebody in the face. That's a complete and utter disgusting act, and Toy should be suspended just like somebody would for punching somebody in the face. It's unacceptable, and he spit on Reggie Cannon. Cameras caught it. Cannon was just out of the shot, but you saw the reaction from the teammates, and that's good that the teammates didn't try to excuse it, didn't try anything to hide it. It's just it's sad to see, and it was deep in stoppage time. But Mason Toy has had a great season and been a very effective player for this team. Man, you just can't do that stuff.
No. And, for Dallas, Cervania getting 2, Mosqueda, Hollingshead, and Reggie Cannon getting the others. So, great for Dallas to take advantage of the rotated side for Minnesota. But, for me, I look at this as and a bit of an opportunity lost for Minnesota, even though I know what happened, middle of the week. But, I think that they're better than how they showed, and Dallas jumped on it.
You're on the road. You played midweek. Dallas didn't. You rotated your squad. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with how Minnesota did here. I really don't. I think sometimes you're in these spots where you've got to look at the bigger picture, and you were 3-3 in this game to 85th minute with a heavily rotated squad. So
yeah,
that's not bad for Minnesota. I'll disagree with the
all right.
the idea there. I don't think they did anything wrong. I don't think they have to do better there. I think sometimes you just gotta make some tough decisions, and when you don't have as much depth as other teams, then yeah, you gotta either play guys or you've got to say, all right, we're gonna turn to Rasmus Schuler here, and he's got to give us something. Well, he gave him something. Not enough, not quite enough, but close.
Right.
Real Salt Lake 2-1 winners over Sporting Kansas City. Looks like the dreams of Sporting Kansas City getting things together and getting into the postseason are slipping away. They're 8 points out right now. This was a very bad loss for them. Peter Vermees was not happy about it afterwards. Corey Baird with 2 goals to lead RSL to the win. I can't figure Kansas City out. I mean, I'm going to chalk it up to injuries as a whole because of you have no continuity. You've been trying to figure it out. Now you're getting guys healthy, but you have no chemistry. 4-5-3 at home, though, that's pretty shocking.
Yeah. And obviously the story for Real Salt Lake is what happened off the pitch, and knew that it was coming. I just didn't know it was going to be that quickly. And now Mike Petke he's got some soul searching to do, and RSL is going to work the rest of the season trying to do what they can in a very wacky West with an interim head coach.
Well, I think the story's on the pitch because RSL didn't have Mike Petke on the sideline, and they went and they got a win on the road with an interim coach. And that's what you build on. I I don't think it's going to affect RSL in any which way that Petke's gone. And it's sad to say that. I mean, Mike Petke's been a fun coach to watch with all of the histrionics and all of that, and I think he has a good way of looking at the game. I think he's done a lot of good things, and he ruined all of that with a very childish tirade. But RSL got a win on the road. Corey Baird, young talent, scored 2 goals. That's the storyline. You got to win on the road with an interim manager. You take that, and that is what you put on the wall, and that is what you talk about every single day. Because RSL is not at the bottom of the Western Conference table. They're in 6th place. They're in a playoff spot right now. They won their 3rd game on the road here in Kansas City. They are in a dogfight to make the playoffs, and they have every opportunity to do so. They're not looking back. They got to look forward, and they got to look at the opportunities that Freddie Juarez is going to give them in charge the rest of the way. Chicago got a surprising win, 3-2 at home over Montreal. Bastian Schweinsteiger, 88th minute game winner. Montreal is still getting their new guys into the mix, but dropping points along the way. They're now in 7th. They're even on points with Toronto, but Toronto has a game in hand. It's not like Toronto is looking all that dangerous at the moment, but Montreal is letting things get away from them. And, oh, yeah, by the way, Chicago's only 3 points out of the playoffs in 10th place. This win keeps them alive.
Yeah, it does. And on the Montreal side of things, both Lapalainen and Bojan got almost 30 minutes when they were introduced into the lineup. But that's, this is what we've talked about when it comes to the East and the West, with everybody being within shoulder's reach. Every match adds that much more of a level of importance. And sometimes it's the unlikeliest places and at the unlikeliest times that you're going to get something to happen. And in this case, Chicago's hanging around. For me, the jury is still out on what to expect from them. But if you're hanging around, you're hanging around. And that's the bottom line when it comes to the playoff picture in both of the conferences. If you get a result here, you get a result there. Chicago ends up with full points. So they are still hanging around. And they, until further notice, they're a team that you've got to think about every single time out of the block.
So you got 10 teams in the Eastern Conference who still have a legit shot. Out west, Colorado, I don't know if they have a legit shot. They're on 26 points. They're 10 points back. But, man, they have been really good under Connor Casey, and they get a big win at home over San Jose. Kellen Acosta with a nice goal. Vaco equalized. Diego Rubio with the winner in the 74th minute. Colorado just keeps on finding ways to get results.
Yeah. And once again, you look at the stats and, you take what you will with it, but practically every single number leans in San Jose's favor. But if you can't do anything with it, all that stuff doesn't matter. And Colorado and Connor Casey, you just, you've dusted yourself off after the Anthony Hudson fiasco, and you're grinding out results. You're getting things done, and there's a lot to look at toward the business end of this season. I don't think they make the playoffs. And in the offseason, working toward next year. So there's a lot to build on here, and there's some pieces. But what do you do with it? I think that's the larger question for Colorado, is that the pieces and the flashes that you see, how do you lock all that stuff up and close it up and move it forward to where you continue to improve, as we've seen in bits and pieces under Connor Casey?
Portland 3-1 winners at home over Vancouver. Vancouver pulled it back to 1-1. Portland puts it away. It's the first of 10 games at Providence Park, and Portland had to get this after a rough week where they lost twice to Minnesota. Marvin Loria is the go-ahead goal in the 55th. Ablabise with the 90th minute insurance goal to put things away. Vancouver gave him a match, and that was maybe a little unexpected, but Portland does what they should here and moves to within 2 points of a playoff spot.
Yeah, and once again, you looked at this when we were checking out Juicebox Purveyors, and it took a little while, but Portland did what you got to do, and this is where they are getting that opportunity with all of these home matches. As we've said, in the entire history of the show, teams that have these kinds of runs at home, for one reason or another, always make the playoffs. Portland making the playoffs, I just want to see where their seeding is, because as we know, the Wild Wild West is here, and Portland is going to be right up there at the top by the time we're talking about things to wrap the season up.
Yeah, it's such an advantage to have these home games at the end, because you've played all season. You have hopefully figured some things out through some rough stretches on the road, and you come back home and you don't have to travel. It makes things easier for you. Philadelphia did what they had to do, beating Houston 2-1. It wasn't easy for them. The Dynamo did give them a fight. Christian Ramirez equalized in the 42nd minute, but Jack Elliott, of all people, kind of a funky one, but he gets the winner in the 78th, and Philadelphia stays on top of the Eastern Conference with a big 3 points.
Yeah, and once again, it's those names that kind of pop up, and that's what you see, and you don't know where it's going to come from. But when you can get a Jack Elliott who can hop in there and give you the goal that gets you full points, then once again, it's the effort of the entire roster. And this time it was Jack Elliott's number to call, and so you get full points, you move on, and you stay where you are.
DC United did what they like to do against big attacking teams. They sat back, they conceded possession, they counterattacked you into oblivion, and they won 2-1 over the LA Galaxy. Zlatan had 15 shots, I think, which is just insanity. No goals.
Wow.
Paul Arriola with a goal in the 28th. Fabio Alvarez pulled one back in the 48th, and it's Lucas Rodriguez who puts it away for DC in the 73rd. 14 shots for Zlatan, only one on target. Bill Hamid made one of the saves of the year to push that one wide, and DC needed 3 points here. I don't know if it was expected with all of the craziness that happened during the week for them, but they beat the Galaxy, and on the flip side, the Galaxy have not looked all that great as of late.
And no Wayne Rooney in the lineup for DC United. Quincy Amarikwa was trying to be in as many of the LA Galaxy heads as humanly possible, standing right up to Zlatan at the beginning of the match, finding any individual in an LA Galaxy kit and trying to just be right there with him the entire time. And good for DC, great win for them. But LA for me is just kind of there. And when you have one guy take half your shots and your shot total's 29, that to me is yikes. That's red flags and sirens and the whole thing.
Why is that?
I'm still not sold long term on the Galaxy in the West. I'm really not. I don't know why. It's like when I see it, I'm like, yeah, seems like
it's easy. Why? I mean, that's a different thing. Like the Galaxy, not being sold on them long term, they're not that great. They don't have that much balance. But one player getting that many shots, it's weird. It doesn't happen that often. But when it's Zlatan and your whole team is built around feeding Zlatan, there's good elements of it because you're getting that many chances, but Zlatan's not converting for you. Well, that's what your whole team is based around. And
I can't remember.
I'll go back to what I've said before. I think the Galaxy ultimately, with the pieces they've put around this group, and now with Christian Pavón, they'll be better when Zlatan is not there anymore. And I don't know if he's back next year, because you get into this situation where all you do is pump in crosses to Zlatan, and that's not always going to work. It's going to work a lot of times. It's not always going to work. It didn't work in this one.
And I just wonder when it comes to Guillermo Barros Escaloto and the front office and Zlatan and his sound bites slamming the league and slamming everything else around him, where your dissipation light is when it comes to putting up with all of this stuff. And I think if you were winning, obviously, and you were winning with distance, I think that the putting up with it would be a lot more than it may be right now. But I think that there's a point, kind of like Jose Mourinho. Usually the third year is when you're done with Jose Mourinho. I think that with Zlatan right now, you just hit that point where you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, we're done. Go ahead and go and find your next fortune.
Maybe. I don't know if the Galaxy front office cares too much about it. I think Schelotto does, and I think he wants to build a team that can play. And they're not. They're just much more limited when they're trying to play to Zlatan than when they can play. So let's take a break. Let's get Chris Fuhrmeister on the line. We're going to talk about his piece over at The Guardian about Frank de Boer and Atlanta United's win over NYC. We'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, August 13th edition. It's a Tuesday Thoughts edition. You guys have had some thoughts on Twitter. We will get to those as we go this morning. But up next, Chris Fuhrmeister of Pro Soccer USA joins us. Chris has been very busy. Big piece over at The Guardian dropped this morning, and we're able to grab him right now to talk about that and talk about NYC as well. What's up, Chris? How are you doing this morning?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well, Jason. How's it going?
Going well. Let's start with NYC and that win. It felt like, I would say, the best 90-minute performance of the season for Atlanta United, and one of just the better matches of the season with two teams that both want to play, both are trying to entertain in different ways. I thought it was a good day at the stadium and a good win for Atlanta.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with all of those points. We were talking to Julian Gressel at training yesterday, and that was one of the things that he said. He said it felt like the Atlanta United of the past few years, and that's what it felt like watching it. I mean, this was a team that was really pushing forward in the attack, really pressing aggressively, just playing with confidence and with aggression that you haven't seen a whole lot this year. You've sort of seen it emerging a little bit in recent weeks, but this was certainly, especially against a top quality opponent like NYC, this was a great performance for them.
And Chris, obviously, with everything that Atlanta United is having to battle schedule-wise, to have guys pop in, perform the way that they are, I think that let's just focus on the first name that pops into my head is Pity Martinez. And you got to see the artist at work, and this was one of those performances where you sit there and you mark it down and you go, yep, that's the guy that a lot of folks were looking at. And it was a great performance from him on a bunch of different levels. creating offense, making sure that the drive was there to pick up what should have been a penalty call. But for me, at least, PT was definitely one of the talking points from the play that was there against NYC.
Yeah, he drew one penalty, should have drawn a second. I think that was a foul in the box, it looked like to me. I think maybe if it had been earlier in the game, perhaps VAR would have actually taken a look at it, but I believe that was sort of as things were winding down. He certainly played well. He's having Ezekiel Barco back really helps him out. That's something that Jeff Laurentowicz said recently, just saying that having a guy like Barco back in the lineup, Barco's a guy who demands attention from defenders, and it just frees up a little bit more space for PT. And we saw them play together against Orlando, and I didn't think that PT had such a great game there when they were both playing as forwards with Joseph Martinez out. But with Joseph and Pitti and Barco all together, I mean, that can be a terrifying attacking trio. And I don't know if it's just playing with those guys gives PT more confidence and that gives him just more energy. But I agree. I think that the game against NYC, that was probably his best game of the year. He was engaged for 90 minutes. He was making the effort defensively. The first penalty that he drew, I mean, that was fantastic, especially considering that Pitti is a guy who has a reputation of just going down so easily and looking for fouls and not taking contact. And he goes in and gives a hard shoulder-to-shoulder challenge on Chinois, a center back, knocks him to the ground, wins the ball, and then takes a guy one-on-one, takes Sands one-on-one in the box to draw the foul and get the penalty. I mean, that was a fantastic play. Joseph's first goal, Gressel hit the incredible first-time cross. I mean, that was a ridiculous cross, but Pitti set him free down the wing with a great, from what it looked like on the replays, like almost a no-look through ball, just showing that he knows exactly where Gressel is going to be, and Gressel knows that ball is going to be coming, and so he can make that run. It's really encouraging if you're hoping for Atlanta's attack to take off. A guy like Pitti Martinez, if he's going to be playing, you need him to be doing these sorts of things, and he really, really turned out on Sunday.
I want to go back to where you started with that and Ezekiel Barco being back in this team. I think it's easy to forget that he hasn't even reached double digits in starts this season and how important he is to this group. Something you touched on. So I think when Barco is there and Joseph is there, it didn't work as well with Orlando because you didn't have that forward up top and you had two guys who are kind of looking to drop and combine, but there's no focal point up top. They had to figure it out, and they did. When you have Joseph and when you also have Nagbe, Remedi, Hindman coming from behind them and your flank play, Barco as a conductor in a lot of ways. He's a player that moves the defense around, whether it's on the dribble where he dribbles across and pulls defenders with him and open up space, or just with his quick switches. Barco is such a huge part of this team, and I think you see the difference when he's in and when he's out.
Absolutely. He's, like you said, on the dribble, he's much better on the dribble when you're talking about sort of advancing play. Like Pitti can try to take a guy one-on-one in the final third, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, I mean, he drew that penalty, and he should have drawn a second penalty. He does have that ability. But really advancing the ball in between lines and getting forward in a way that Miguel Almiron used to do. I mean, I'm not going to say that Barco has quite that ability because Miguel Almiron's speed and touch was just an incredible combination that allowed him to do that. It's different,
but that's a really good comparison.
It's when you watch him, he will get on the ball in midfield and he will look upfield and go, and he will. Yeah, he's not as fast as Miggy, but he wants to advance on the dribble. But yes, he also can play those great switches, can play a great ball, and so that it just keeps. It really unbalances the defense because it, like you said, it drags defenders all over the place and it gets the ball into open spaces and to Atlanta players in open spaces very quickly. And that's what Atlanta's biggest problem has been this year when the attack has looked bad, is that the ball has been moving too slowly and not been getting into spaces quickly enough. And And yeah, I mean, Barco, I think between his run at the Under-20 World Cup and then his injury layoff after that, if I remember correctly, he missed something like 15 games. I mean, like almost half the season in that stretch. So the fact that he's coming back now, if he stays healthy for the stretch run and then the playoffs, it's a completely different Atlanta team with him in the lineup. And we saw that before he left, that Atlanta was starting to look a little better and that he was really starting to play a role. And so you just have to think that's going to continue down the stretch.
And to get involved in all of these starts and stops with lineups and permutations and combinations, I think it gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. Just the sheer number of injuries and juggling that the staff has had to do to put a team out there, in whether it's an 18 or a starting 11, and be creative about it and still, Chris, get the results that they're getting on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of always thought that as the season went on, and especially as Atlanta started getting results, DeBoer was continuing to take heat from the fans for maybe the attack wasn't looking good. Maybe they were getting results, but they weren't getting enough results compared to last year in a championship season. But it's been a difficult year. The schedule has been congested. Starting the year with Champions League play meant that it took a long time for DeBoer to fully get his full complete system installed. I don't think it's fully installed yet. I think he's working on it. He's getting more in, but it's probably not all the way there yet. And yes, the injuries, Atlanta has lost so many key bodies all year, and they've gone into the transfer market and they've picked up players to boost the depth, and it's been huge. I mean, having Heinemann, having Miram, we've talked about Miram. I feel like every time I've come on this show, those guys have been huge to cover for the injuries, but nevertheless, Atlanta has been dealing with injuries. Atlanta has been forced into squad rotation because of injuries and to altering formations. I think that maybe most recently the fullback injuries that sort of forced DeBoer to go into this 3-5-2 were, that's almost a happy accident because this formation certainly suits the team better. You hate it for Breck Shea and Mikey Ambrose. You don't want those guys to be injured, but moving to the 3-5-2 has really unlocked the attack. So, I think the fact that they rebounded from a slow start, they climbed the table while dealing with all these absences, it was impressive.
Let's jump into the piece that you wrote for The Guardian about Frank DeBoer, and how did everything come about, and what were some of the things that jumped out to you during your time with Frank?
Yeah, that was just I had a one-on-one with him at the training ground. We sat in the lobby and chatted for about 40 minutes or so, and I just wanted to sort of have a broad conversation with him for The Guardian. That's, as they like to say, their international audience. So I wanted to. It wasn't going to be just specifically Atlanta and MLS related. And Frank is a guy who he answers questions directly, as we all know. I mean, he will answer questions directly about players, about whatever you ask him, and that's what that was what happened when I spoke to him. I mean, he obviously the biggest talking point that comes out of that seems to be his stance on the equal pay debate. He is a supporter of women's soccer, of women's football, and wants to see it continue to grow and get more popular. But he believes that it is not as popular as the men's game, and that there therefore is not the same amount of revenue from sponsorships, from advertising, whatever, and that therefore that men's and women's teams, if there is that revenue gap, that they should not be paid the same. That's that is the debate. And that's what his stance on the debate. We also talked about his time at Crystal Palace and Inter, and how they were both short stints. And I asked him, considering that Atlanta had a slow start to this year and they have since rebounded, if that made him believe that he would have achieved the same sort of turnaround at his previous two jobs. And he was very confident that he absolutely would have done it. He feels like he really does feel shortchanged with the amount of time that he received at both of those jobs, particularly Palace, because he felt like that Palace wanted to go from being a team that just is sort of bunker and counter team that just tries to survive, playing what he called relegation football, to being a modern team that actually plays the modern game and could be more than a relegation fighter, and that he just didn't get the chance to actually implement his plan that he thought he was going to get. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation.
I want to get a little bit of clarification on the women's conversation, because was he talking specifically about the Netherlands and the women's game there?
He was. I asked him about,
okay,
because he is a Dutch international back in the day, and I asked him about the Dutch national team because they actually have instituted that policy.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people will jump around on stuff like that. Like when you compare what the U.S. women have coming in terms of revenue versus really any other country, it's not the same conversation. So I wanted to make that clear, because I think some people will jump on that, and that's a pretty important distinction. And you nailed it in the article. I just wanted to make sure people listening understood that. Yeah,
absolutely. It was a conversation surrounding the Dutch policies specifically.
Yeah.
Chris, when we look at, simple math when it comes to Frank de Boer, it was 77 days at Crystal Palace, 85 days at Inter. And if I take my shoes off and try to do math, that's 162 days. And that comes out to combined a little more than 5 months total. And de Boer has specifically said, I need 6 months to get things started in get things instituted the way that I like, and get things going forward from there. 6 months from the day he was hired puts it at mid-July. And in discussing Atlanta United, so we're now in month number 7 of Frank de Boer instituting things. And as you look at these first 7 months, what have been, other than injuries and juggling and all this kind of stuff, what's your 30,000-foot view of what you've been able to see from Frank de Boer trying to get his systems and his ideas installed at Atlanta United?
Well, he starts with the defensive side of the system, and that's what in Atlanta caused everyone so many headaches, that Atlanta was trying to be a defensive team, everyone said, and nobody liked that because we're all accustomed to the high-flying attack under Tata Martino. But he recently at a training said that his system and the defensive system first, it's sort of like a base model car. Like it's the base model, it works, it can get you from A to B. And then as time goes, you can add on options and, make it a nicer car. And that's how he described it. And that's what he does. He's adding options in the attack. And that's something I asked Julian Gressel yesterday about how he has seen the progression happen and in training. And at the beginning of the year, you remember the players, they said that all they talked about was defending. They'd never worked on any of the attack. Yesterday, Julian Gressel said that they hardly ever talk about defending anymore, that they're almost always focused on the attacking side of the game. So de Boer is a manager who wanted to have his defensive principles installed first and foremost, and so then he was going to always add on to the attack. And yes, he needs time to do that. Going back to Palace, I think that installing his system with the players that they had, it was going to be, it looks like that he's going to get his system installed in the first season in Atlanta. It probably would have taken longer at Palace because of the personnel there. Just was not a good fit for what he wanted to do. But here, yes, he has always said that he just needs time. And that's what he said in the immediate aftermath after he was fired from Palace. And it's what he has said. It's what he said to me. It's what he said earlier this year. It's what he said in his introductory press conference. And he has gotten that time in Atlanta. And I think that it's working out for him, and it's working out for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think when you look around the league, Major League Soccer hopefully is starting to go beyond bringing in managers who are plug-and-play guys who are just going to to come in and rally the troops and give a great speech and get effort and heart and hustle, and that's all it is. I think when you see a match like Sunday, for me, with two managers who both have had questions asked of them with performances early on in their tenures in Toronto and DeBoer, but it feels like both are building something. And you look at other, managers around the league, and it feels the same way in different parts of the league. The coaching level in the league, what's your take on it across the board? Is it something that still needs to be boosted up? Is it something that we're starting to see progress in?
Oh, I think we're absolutely seeing progress. And I think that continued progress would be great too. But yeah, the coaching. I mean, Frank DeBoer, even considering that he had two bad runs, at Inter Milan and at Crystal Palace, he was a world-class player, and he was a rising star in the manager world when he was at Ajax. I mean, he was great at Ajax, led them to 4 titles in the Dutch league. And Bob Bradley, I mean, he's got a track record. He's kind of outperforming, I think, what a lot of people thought he would do. I don't think that most American fans realized that he had these attacking ideas to play this great system. Having Matthias Almeida with the Earthquakes, I mean, that's a great manager in San Jose, which is a team that was just terrible last year and has been struggling. So yeah, the managerial level in MLS has absolutely been on the rise, and it needs to continue to go on the rise. And that doesn't mean just bringing in big name foreign managers. I mean, you can identify American talent and put those guys in the right place. I mean, maybe Josh Wolf at Austin. I don't know enough about him to say whether or not that I think that's a good hire, but he seems to be a guy who is an up and comer that a lot of people like, and maybe he'll turn out to be a great manager too. And so there are different ways to have a good manager, and I think that MLS is mostly across the board finding ways to get good managers in. And that's another thing that we talked to Eric Rometti at training recently, and I asked him if specifically players from Argentina who are coming to the league, if seeing these sort of bigger managers being in the league is that important, and is that a big draw? And he absolutely agreed that, it shows that the league is quality to have such impressive names doing things in this league.
What about the competition that's coming up at Mercedes-Benz midweek? What's your view on Campeones Cup and where it sits in this season and the building of the resume of Atlanta United?
It's a tough one to figure out. If you ask Darren Eales, which I did, he wants to win it. He considers it a trophy. It's an important thing. I mean, anybody who's on that field is going to be taking it seriously. Anybody who's playing in the game is going to be giving 100% effort. Frank DeBoer would be giving 100% effort managing the game. How much squad rotation there is from Atlanta and from America, I mean, I don't know what their view on the game is either. I think that remains to be seen. They released the roster, and it's pretty much a full selection of Atlanta players, of those who are healthy. So Frank DeBoer could field a first choice 11 if he wanted. I kind of don't think that he would do that. Joseph Martinez, I would be surprised if he started, considering he's dealing with an adductor injury and he just played on Sunday. But then again, I was really surprised that he was even in the 18 on Sunday, much less starting. So Joseph has surprised me before. He will again, I'm sure. I don't know. I think that you'll see an Atlanta lineup that has some rotation. DeBoer has said in the past that he doesn't like to rotate the full squad. He thinks that the players who are on the field in that situation, they're not accustomed to playing with each other, and they're not really getting an opportunity to play in a team that really is a team. So I think that you'll see guys who need rest, guys that he would be cautious with at all, might be held out. But there will be a lot of familiar faces, especially considering a lot of players have played a role for Atlanta this year. So it's one of those games where if Atlanta loses, well, It was a one-game thing and kind of a glorified friendly. If Atlanta wins, they'll certainly hoist that trophy.
Looking ahead to the next three matches as we wrap up with you, Chris. 3 games on the road, Portland, Orlando, Philadelphia, all different challenges in those 3. Is there a number of points that you feel like is a target, an acceptable target for Atlanta in these next 3?
I don't know if there would be a specific number that is a target. I think that you would certainly want to get 3 points in Orlando. It'll be a tough road environment, but as we've seen, Atlanta can win there. Atlanta can win there without Joseph Martinez. So if everybody's healthy, barring some rash of injuries, I think that they should get 3 points in Orlando. And DeBoer will want to get wins in Portland and in Philadelphia, and he doesn't really go into – I mean, the way that he says it is that he doesn't really go into games looking for a draw. If the game starts to play out where a draw is a good result, then he'll take it. But he says that he doesn't go into games looking for a draw. I think that the way he set up his team sometimes on the road this year sort of betrays that idea. I think that he has been more conservative away from home. I think that's going to be interesting to see, that now that this team is really playing in a different way with newfound confidence, playing aggressively, playing in the attack. I'm interested to see how he sets them up at Portland and at Philadelphia particularly, because those are huge games. I think you saw against LAFC, Atlanta came out a little more aggressive than they typically have on the road, and I kind of expect that to be the case. The Philadelphia game will be just massive, especially if both of these teams keep winning. I mean, that could be the game that decides who wins the Eastern Conference and gets home field advantage in the playoffs up until the MLS Cup final. So I'm hesitant to put a number of how many points would be successful. I think it's more of, at the end of this stretch, if they are still right there with Philadelphia, whether that's ahead of Philadelphia or just still right on their heels, then that is what is a success.
It's going to be a fun stretch run for Atlanta United and the rest of MLS. Chris, thanks for the time. Make sure you're following him, CCFUHR, on Twitter, and all of his great work over at Pro Soccer USA. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to get into some of the announcements yesterday. U.S. Soccer has hired a women's general manager. They've also moved some other pieces around, and we'll get into all of that right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here. Hour number 2 on August 13th. It's a Tuesday Thoughts edition. There are lots of thoughts out there, and we will get to all of those thoughts. We will finish up with our MLS weekend recap real quick with probably the game of the weekend, LAFC and New York Red Bulls, at least in terms of, I think, the national side of it. I think the spectacle of it. It's a good match, back and forth, all kinds of weirdness. LAFC jumped out to a 2-goal lead with 2 goals in 3 minutes. Jordan Harvey, of all people, getting the first. Latif Blessing getting the second. Red Bulls equalize before halftime with 2 goals in 4 minutes. Christian Caceres and an own goal back off the post and off of Tyler Miller. Second half, LAFC eventually wore the Red Bulls down. They get a penalty kick that Carlos Vela converts. Eddie Segura, another defender, with a goal for LAFC, and they get the 4-2 win. What were your takeaways?
Other than it being absolutely crazy bonkers, I think that folks will look at LAFC and see some things that they might be able to take advantage of defensively. But once again, where LAFC is concerned, you can't turn off. And you've got to be right there the entire time. And it was just that little bit, and it's goals in quick succession. So for me, there are a couple of different things, but the biggest thing is that you can't switch off, and they will absolutely take advantage at Bank of California. But I think that Bob Bradley does have some concerns defensively that he has to address over time that folks will be looking at on tape.
All right, let's get into U.S. Soccer's announcement yesterday. Not a surprise that Kate Markgraf is named the women's national team general manager. That had been leaked out there a while back. No surprise. The surprise that I had not seen anybody with was that now Ernie Stewart, instead of being the men's general manager, now he is the sporting director for both the men and the women. And Markgraf and whoever is hired as the new men's general manager will answer to Ernie Stewart. Ernie Stewart will deal with the CEO. Didn't expect that. And it's not how the reorganization was framed when everything started down this road. I'm a little surprised by it. I have to say that the black helicopter started circling a little bit, and when you talk about CEO and all of the conversations around who will replace Dan Flynn in that role, and Jay Berhalter's name comes up quite often. And look, I think the thing to keep in mind that you have to be fair about this, and we'll keep digging into it to try to. I want to explain kind of where I'm seeing it. If Jay Berhalter's name was Jim Smith, and he did what Jay Berhalter has done with the Federation, and he was hired as the CEO, promoted essentially into the CEO role, there wouldn't really be a lot of questions about it. It's not like he has been a bad performer in terms of production. Now, there are questions about the culture at U.S. Soccer, and there are questions about things in the office and that sort of stuff, as we saw from all of the next door reviews, where it reportedly was employees who said that the culture was bad and all kinds of different things. That's a different conversation from what we see from the outside. Jay Berhalter has done a fine job in his role. However, you can't separate the names because the manager of the men's national team is Greg Berhalter, Jay's brother. Am I wrong to think that this feels like a move to make it more comfortable for Jay Berhalter to move into the CEO role?
I don't think so. I think that what you're doing now, all right, so let me see if I have the pyramid structure correct now with Ernie. So Ernie goes to sporting director, which creates another level in the Chiefs within the structure of the soccer organizational pyramid. And so you now have, taking one section of the flow chart, you now have a general manager on the women's side in Kate Markgraf. And now, if you take the arrow and go the other way, or you take the line and turn it to the right, you're now going to need a general manager. Is it going to be a general manager and a CEO on that same line?
No.
On the men's side, or how are we looking at this?
No, it's the same on both sides. It's what you did is you added a layer. The GMs were supposed to report to the CEO. Now you've added a sporting director that the GMs report to, and the sporting director reports to the CEO.
Yeah. So, this to me is just trying to add that extra organizational layer and create organizational space, for lack of a better word. But no, I think that your assessment is correct when it comes to Jay Berhalter.
And look, I mean, from a general organization standpoint, it makes sense. I mean, to have a sporting director that the GMs making sporting decisions, they're not making business decisions about those national teams. I don't think that was the intention. Having a GM report to a sporting director who are talking about the sporting decisions, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's not craziness to think that way. But it wasn't what was initially presented. So that has to grab your attention a little bit. So Ernie Stewart gets promoted. We'll see who gets the men's general manager role now. It's Kate Markgraf as the women's general manager, which I think is a great hire. I've been really impressed with her thoughts on just soccer in general, on the Women's World Cup. I thought she gave great commentary all tournament long on ESPN in a studio role. I like her perspective on it. I think she's a great fit. On ESPN recently, she said her most likely candidates, this is before she got the job, obviously, but I would assume it was after conversations had been had, but we don't know. She said that the most likely candidates for the women's national team coaching job were Laura Harvey with the Utah Royals, Paul Riley with North Carolina Courage, Vlatko Andonovsky with Reign SC, and Mark Krikorian of Florida State. But yesterday, Markgraf said, quote, "I would like to hire a woman if all things are being equal, but in the end, it will come down to the best candidate regardless of gender." I'm intrigued to see where that goes, and I'm intrigued to see where it needs to go, because I don't really know what would be the better situation. I mean, Laura Harvey has done an amazing job in the NWSL. So has Paul Riley.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to go male-female here? I'm not sure. I think the PR side of it, unfortunately, does play into this and how complicated it is. It's a tricky situation, and honestly, just beyond the gender side of it, it's a huge hire. Because you're at a point now where you have an Olympics coming up. You've got to qualify for it. You'll have a qualifying tournament in CONCACAF. You should be fine there. But you're going to have to make some decisions. Even if you said, we're only going to look at the roster from the last World Cup, you're going to have to cut players because you can only take 18 to the Olympics. That changes the way you think about your overall roster because you need some players who are maybe a little more versatile. All right? You also have a older core that is going to be phased out, but when and how fast, and what about the next generation coming through? Because there's a lot of work for Markgraf to do underneath the women's national team manager in terms of rebuilding the youth development, rebuilding the youth side of it. You haven't had great results at the youth national team level on the women's side in a while. This is going to be a very important hire that has to be done correctly.
No doubt. And one of the other aspects of Kate Markgraf and her resume that I didn't know was her academic research. And when I was doing research on Markgraf being hired and all of that, she has research on elite athletes and the influence of grit. And it's referred to as a psychological metric predictive of success in elite domains. It was the first of its kind published with her as the co-author with her advisor as one of her 2 graduate degrees in sports psychology. And you wonder how that may play into things in developing the program too.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And that's part of it. I don't know how much that plays into developing the program. I think the hires are going to be the important thing for Markgraf, and you've got to get, I think, just a different view of what they're looking for. And yeah, from a player perspective, you do want players who have grit, obviously. I think that's a known. How do you define it? That's not easy, and we'll see if things like that help. But for me, you've got to develop more technical players. Beyond the grit side, you've got to develop more technical players because you're not able to dominate just with athleticism anymore.
Nope.
And you had enough players here to get the job done. And Jill Ellis pushed all the right buttons and got it right, but everybody else is going to push even further and even harder in developing talent, developing their athleticism as well. You're going to see some differences in the women's game over this next cycle, and the U.S. has to evolve just like everybody else. That's going to be the question for whoever Kate Markgraf hires. I think Grant Wall raises a very valid question. So Ernie Stewart was hired first. Ernie Stewart was in the job for a year. Ernie Stewart oversaw the hiring process of Greg Berhalter. If the women's general manager had been hired first, would the women's general manager have just been promoted to be in charge of everything? Grant Wall says no. I would tend to agree with that. Now you have Stewart after, was it a great hiring process to get Greg Berhalter? No. Stewart wasn't involved in all of it, by the way. That needs to be made very clear, is that he was hired on August 1st of last year. That hiring process had dragged on from, November of 17.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all on Ernie Stewart, but it wasn't handled incredibly well. Now Stewart oversees the process on Markgraf's side of hiring the women's national team manager. Stewart oversees the youth national teams. Stewart oversees all of the Paralympic national team, futsal, beach soccer, all of the other elements of it, the high performance, the analytics, sports science, all that type of stuff. That's a lot. What has he done to get that opportunity? I don't know. We'll have to find out. We'll have to see how it goes. The whole process was very weird. And what grabs my attention is just the whole reorganization idea with general managers for the national teams was presented not that long ago to look like X. You had a flow chart, you had a pyramid, you had a organizational chart, whatever. And then a little over a year later, he said, okay, we're going to change that and add something else to it. That is odd. That is not normal. And that was my immediate reaction when this came out yesterday.
No, I'm right there with you. It's like you say that you're going to be doing something in one direction, and then a year later, you do something else. So, my shrugged shoulders and raised eyebrow don't quite translate to radio, but it's like, okay, so you did this for a year, and now you're doing something else. And, yeah, that does raise questions, and you're kind of sitting there trying to I'm still trying to honestly I'm processing, but naturally inquisitive about, okay, you change things after a year, and so now I'm kind of wary about things moving forward, but that's just me, I guess.
So a couple things that came out from the presser yesterday. No news on the CEO search. Carlos Cordero told Jonathan Tannenwald, we will find an opportunity to come back to you in the weeks ahead with an answer. So no update there. Confirmed that the general managers are the ones who will hire the coaches. The CEO will have broad responsibility, is the quote. for everything that happens, including the soccer side, but it's not the CEO with a veto. Okay, let's see how that goes. Ernie Stewart said that the vacancies on the men's national team youth coaching ranks are his responsibility, quote, and now we will go full steam ahead, unquote, in filling them. I don't know what the problem was before when he was the men's GM, but I don't know how that worked. Ernie Stewart was also asked about Tab Ramos and his status in the hierarchy and his future. Ernie said, quote, we'll speak with individuals before we speak to the outside world. I think Tab's contract is up either at the end of I thought it was up at the end of this year. I saw another tweet that it wasn't up until 2021, the next U20 cycle. I'm not sure. I don't know. Tab's done a pretty good job, and I don't know where. Now I'm assuming that the youth national team, like I think Tab was a technical director on the youth national teams, I'm assuming that responsibility is now under the general manager for that gender. So the men's national team general manager, well, actually, no, I take that back. Ernie Stewart said it's his responsibility, maybe just because there's not a men's national team general manager anymore because he got promoted. The youth national teams, there's got to be attention paid to them because I don't think there's been enough in recent years outside of Tab's work.
No, I'm right there with you, and I want to see what the process is with Tab, and I want him to hang around as long as possible, considering what he's built. But once again, okay, so these are the questions, and let's come up with answers so folks aren't sitting here and wondering when those questions are going to be answered. I'm looking for definitive action so everything can go forward.
No, I think Tab needs to go. Not because he's done a bad job. I think Tab needs to go for his own development because
true. Yeah.
At this case, he was not really considered for the men's national team job. I don't think he's going to be after another cycle of the U20s. Don't think Greg Berhalter's going anywhere anytime soon. I think Tab needs to look at a professional coaching job to better prepare himself to be a either senior national team manager, or if he does well at a club, then he stays in the club game. But I think Tab's done all he can do. The whole thing just feels strange, and it feels weird and a little haphazard, far more haphazard than it should. I want to go back to, okay, now we have a general manager on the women's side. Now the process to hire a new national team manager really, truly starts. We'll see who gets interviewed. We'll see how that goes. You're going to have to come to a decision fairly quickly, or you're going to have to figure out an interim situation because of CONCACAF Olympic qualifying. I want to go back to what we talked about with Chris and the comments that Frank DeBoer made, because you've been in this process. You know how this goes, where you write an article and then editors or whatever come up with headlines to sell it.
Yep.
I was not surprised at all that the headline on this one was the comments about the women's game, and that's why when we talked to Chris, we wanted to stress, you're talking about the women's game in the Netherlands, where they hadn't qualified for a World Cup until 2015. This was their second World Cup, and they got to the final. But the league is, it's not big at all. It's not anything to really talk about. So you're coming from a different perspective. I know why the headline was chosen. I get it. But that is not the same conversation that the U.S. women's national team is having.
No. And a lot of times we get lost in modifiers. And if there's a modifier that's not in a sentence, then the context of what we're looking at goes in a different direction than we think it is. And I'm glad that what you did was ask Chris specifically what Frank was talking about when it comes to what he was thinking in the article. So I'm glad that you made the point to double check with Chris that this is what Frank was talking about. And I know that editors look for headlines and things like that, but I'm glad more than anything that you got the clarification and re-asking Chris what was going on.
Yeah, it's just an important distinction because the revenue side, as much as we want to have a legitimate conversation, and it needs to be had about this stuff, but part of it is the revenues are different. They are, and they're not as different in the United States, or nowhere near as different in the United States. And you can look at what the U.S. women's national team does about drawing spectators and drawing sponsors that are specific to the women's national team. Now, this is something U.S. Soccer has to get better at. When they're lumping everything together in terms of sponsorships, you can't necessarily tell very easily how much Nike is paying for the women's sponsorship and the men's sponsorship. You can't. The TV stuff, you can't. It's all lumped together. That's going to end up being a decision for a judge to make, it sounds like, or an arbitrator. But the revenues of games and tickets sold, that stuff's there. And it is, depending on the year, depending on the sample size. If you want to look at the 10 years, U.S. Soccer says that the men made more money. If you look at the last 4 years, the women made more money, according to other studies. Whatever. It's pretty freaking close.
Yeah.
It's not the differences in others. And at the club level, it's a whole different conversation because you're talking about, just look at MLS versus the NWSL and look at attendances, and you can tell, you can see where things are. I'll go back to what I've said initially, all the way through this. There are certain things that a federation overseeing soccer in that country cannot justify being different. Things like per diems, I think things like roster bonuses, camp bonuses, however you want to frame these things. There are certain things that are just, you're part of the team, you're going to get paid X. That's what it should be all the way across the board. There are other things that make it more complicated. I hope that the conversation can be a little more nuanced and figure this out. Again, I get why this headline popped up, but when I started reading it, I'm like, wait a minute. That's not what people are going to jump in on the U.S. side.
Right.
It's a different conversation in other countries, and in any of them, it's not cut and dried at all.
And I think that's one of the larger takeaways in all of this is that it is case by case, and I think that you need to look at all of the information provided to you as best as the information is out there and look at it in each individual opportunity. And yes, when you see things, we all want the game to grow. We all want it to go forward, both sides, men's and women's. I mean, yesterday, to give you an example, here in the office, I had the Liga MX Femenina on, and for it to be on live television on a Monday afternoon is absolutely tremendous. It was at Pumas's training facility, and you had a crowd there. But once again, it's all in the steps, and it's different from country to country. And I just want everyone who is going after these topics and researching these topics and wanting the game to continue to go forward to get as much information as possible when you're going to have conversations about it and be informed about it. And so for me, it's in seeing this article that Chris put together and getting Frank's comments about it, that's part of my education process when it comes to the whole game going forward.
When you talk about Liga MX Femenina, I want to make something that I've really appreciated about the Mexican Federation in this clear, and Liga MX clear. They have invested in promoting the women's game. They've invested in marketing the women's game. They have invested to raise the awareness in the women's game with the goal, ultimately, of making more money, as it should be. And if they make more money, salaries go up, everything else changes. That's the point. That's the idea. I want to see U.S. soccer put more of an emphasis on marketing the women's game, marketing the NWSL, making the awareness grow of the league, of the talented players that play in it, in order for the league to make more money through ticket sales, through sponsorships, through eventually player sales. All of the normal things when it comes to the soccer business. When you look at investment, for me, that's where it should be, because it has to stand on its own as a business. And that's...
Yes.
I don't think anything will function long term if it's treated as a charity. I think it works if it's treated as a business. And the way to help it be a standalone business and a sustainable business is to invest in that awareness and that marketing so people know about it and people get hooked on it and then people follow it. I think what Mexico is doing and what Liga MX is doing specifically is really smart, because getting these games on TV, getting them out there for people, having recap shows, making it easy for people to follow. That's what needs to happen here. It's too hard to follow NWSL. The league feels like it's off in a corner from the rest of the U.S. soccer landscape. U.S. soccer needs to step up on that. And whatever that looks like, if it is going to the partners with Soccer United Marketing and saying, look, we want you to include NWSL streaming rights in your next deal. We want it to be in the same place that MLS is. If it's, we're going to pay for and put together a program recapping the week in the NWSL. If it's whatever, that's where they need to invest. That's where I want to see them invest so it can stand alone. Because the product, in my opinion, can stand alone. The product is really good. The problem is not enough people see it and know that.
Right.
That's what has to change. That's how it changes for the long term. And that's what hopefully will change. And that's what we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting to see how people jump on this and how it goes. But it's a complicated process all the way around. And every country has its own challenges with it. And every soccer culture has its own challenges with it. U.S. soccer is going to have a lot of challenges with sorting this out and not getting crushed in the PR battle. Hiring lobbyists, probably not the greatest way to win the PR battle.
No.
I'm just saying.
No.
It's a bad
No.
look. Get it right and get it done, and let's move forward. Please, U.S. soccer, please. I'm begging, please. I'm not expecting it, but please.
Yeah.
Let's take a break, and let's get back into the Twitter timeline on a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show, August 13th. We have had enough thoughts. We'll have more. But you guys have thoughts. And we want to see what you're thinking about on a Tuesday. John, what are the peeps tweeting at us about?
Collins Westcott. Let's say LAFC goes on to win the West, sets the points record, but Atlanta United wins the East. Joseph catches Vela for the Golden Boot, breaks his own single-season goals record from last season. Who wins MVP?
Probably Vela. I think they would be reluctant in that case if it's two very close calls. I think they'd be reluctant to give the same guy another MVP trophy. I think Vela would get it.
Eric Schwartz. Thoughts on the new configuration for Campeones Cup? Level 1 only, set to be the least attended Atlanta United game at MBS. Should be an interesting buy. Can't wait to hoist more silverware.
I hadn't seen that. I haven't seen anything about the configuration yet, so I don't know on that. Look, this game and this idea, it's going to take some time. I keep wanting to call it like a Super Cup because that's what it feels like. It feels like a not friendly, but not Open Cup final, not a cup final in that way. It feels like it would be a great season kickoff event. It's awkward where it is in the schedule. I'm surprised that it hasn't gotten quite as much hype, although in Spanish language, it is something that's being talked about a lot. It's been on the TUDN morning show a good bit here, talking about it and prepping for it, and it's a big deal in terms of bragging rights. It is. I mean, we can say that it isn't, but it is. You know it is. Anytime this game comes up, it does. It starts that process. It's a game that ultimately has value in it. I think it's a game that you're not going to get to the MLS teams beating Mexican teams if they don't play. You're not going to get to that if these games don't happen. I just would love it if this game was earlier in the calendar as opposed to now. I think then it would feel right. Right now, it feels like a bit of a distraction, and that's not what you want out of this match.
Michael Ruiz has 3 thoughts. First one, he wants to know what we think about what happened in the supporter section Sunday.
Look, I wasn't there, and I've seen all kinds of reports, and I mean, I don't think people are lying about what happened, and I don't know, but the couple things that have jumped out to me, and again, I was not there, and I don't know what happened because I wasn't there. I've seen some of the videos. I've seen all the stuff. I think there is a separation between team and stadium personnel, and that's an important distinction that hasn't been made consistently. I think the league and the Players Association kind of went at this as well today. The league has to be more clear in what is allowed and what isn't, because it is far too vague. I think that is the most important thing right now in the current climate, because when you leave it vague, when you open up the door to things, you're going to get whichever side group, whatever, that wants to push boundaries. And if the league would better define it, then I think it's a little more clear in what's allowed and what's not. Because now it even feels like it's inconsistent venue to venue. It's open to interpretation. It's just, I don't know. I hate that this is a distraction from what was a great match. I hate that it is creating this type of feeling around it. I do, but I don't know if there's an easy way to solve it either. I don't know how this gets handled comfortably, because it's very difficult when people are entrenched on their opinions about it. And I don't know if there's a comfortable solution, period.
Yeah, and like I said, I saw stills and I've seen reports and read message board things. And, for me, once again, you have personnel for the building, personnel for the league, and all that kind of stuff. And I know that there are certain things that you can and cannot do when you're coming into the building. And I don't know where that fell into all of this when it comes to, I think that there are certain things that you can bring in, certain things that can have banners and things like that. So I don't know if that was a part of the whole dynamic, but I'm still getting all the information that I can about it, still looking at what's being there, but you're hoping that there is some kind of a solution that's down the line when it comes to everything that went down over the weekend. Second thought from Michael. Hold on.
Sure. One more thing I want to say about this.
Right.
One of the stories, and I think the one that got a lot of traction on Reddit, was someone who was involved in creating the banners said that they came in and they knew that banners were going to get taken, and they said that was kind of the point, that they wanted to make a point. I think if it had remained there, okay, points made. You're seeking more clarity from the league in what is allowed and what isn't. You're seeking consistency. All that's great. When it spiraled out from there, look, some of the videos, you're seeing security maybe a little heavy-handed. You're also seeing people on the other side pushing back on security. That's never going to go well in any situation. Anybody who's worked security in any scenario, it's you get pushed or you get pulled at or whatever. It's rough.
Yeah.
And that part is where I hate that happened. If it had been what it sounds like was intended, banners that were provocative and banners that you knew were going to be taken, and that's your point, and then the point's been made, cool. Yep. Nothing wrong with that at all. I think from there is where it spiraled out of control.
Yeah. Michael went back to our conversation that we had in the last block, saying that we have to find a new men's GM. Ay Dios mio, and it looks like there's a facepalm emoji following.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what direction you go in now, and that's why it kind of grabbed me as interesting that Ernie Stewart said, well, now it's my responsibility to hire the youth national team coaches on the boys' side, and that's something we're going to do full steam ahead. Well, why wasn't that happening before? Like, what was the process before? Now why is the sporting director doing that instead of the men's GM? You were the men's GM. I'm confused.
Yes.
I don't know what the deal is, so I don't know.
Third thought
now you're
from
in a hiring
Michael.
process again on the men's side, and we'll see how long that takes.
You're hiring in a hiring process. Third thought from Michael. Thoughts on ticket prices for Campione's Cup and a lack of attendance. He says he'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, I mean, where are the prices compared to average games? They're higher, right?
I thought so.
That was the general vibe. It's an MLS match, and they're setting the prices. I know there was talk when MLS Cup was the same way. It was higher than normal, which it's a final. It's understandable. This is not at the value of MLS Cup, and it's something that the league's going to have to figure out long term. It's tough because when you're trying to establish something as a big deal, you price it as a big deal. When you price it as a not important deal, people treat it as a not important deal. But then the flip side is it's not a big deal yet. So you're stuck. You hope that what happens here is that you do have a very engaged crowd. It is a good atmosphere, and it's a great match. And then next year, whoever is hosting Campeones Cup is very excited to do so, and the fans are very excited about seeing it. It's just going to take time to build. That's what I keep coming back to, is it's a game in year 2 that doesn't have the value that it can have yet, and it's going to take time to build it.
It looks like going through the official ticket provider of MLS, you can get stuff in the 200s starting at $58.
Okay.
And then there are some club level seats that are available as well. So that's just me doing a quick peek of what things are through the official ticket folks of MLS. Daniel Price is in work, so he sent in a couple of questions to get things prepared so he can hang up and listen as well.
All right.
His first thought is on Daniel Sturridge. He says, with DC and Philly allegedly going for him, who of the two is most likely to get him?
Neither. I mean, DC doesn't need him because they have Ola Kamara and they have Wayne Rooney for the rest of the year, so they don't need him. I think they were talking to him before Ola Kamara got done. Philadelphia, sure, but I think they're going to have to pay a ton of money to get him. I think there's like 97 other clubs that are trying to get Daniel Sturridge right now at last count. So I don't see DC or Philly. I don't think DC is going to push right now. And according to Stephen Goff, they were worried about his fitness. If you're Philadelphia, that should be a red flag, and you shouldn't commit the money that it would take to get him. I think he ends up China, Middle East, and he has to prove himself a little bit before he gets an opportunity to come back to a bigger league or bigger club. I think the fitness is always going to be the question.
And this one has the hashtag fatherly advice and hashtag deep Tuesday thoughts.
Uh-oh.
And we all know that Daniel and the boss are expecting a striker, I believe, toward the first of the year. He says, if I have a son in the foreseeable future, do I name him after my father, whose name is Joseph PH, but slant the spelling toward our Lord and Savior Joseph with an F? And would the boss allow me to do such things?
Well, I can't speak for the boss, so I'm not even going to try because I don't want to get smacked in the back of the head at some point. Be kind of cool to not blend them together, but to go with the F instead of the PH if that's acceptable. That's kind of cool.
Then the other question from Daniel is a hashtag Tuesday lineup thoughts, chances of having both Tito and Joseph in the starting 11.
I don't think you go with both. I don't think you need to go with both here in this situation. I've said from the beginning, and I'm still my brain's kind of on this path. I think if Tito can give you 45, you start him in place of Joseph, and then Joseph comes in to finish it. That way you manage the minutes for both. I wouldn't want to, unless Tito can get further than 45, which maybe he can. I mean, you don't know where his fitness is because we didn't see him on Sunday. Playing those two together in the 3-5-2 is extremely different from a style standpoint than Joseph with Barco or Pitti as the second forward. Tito's going to stay up with Joseph. He's going to play up high. Either Joseph is going to drop in more, which is possible. We've seen plenty of it this season. Or you're just going to play it very, very differently with two up high. I don't know if you want to go there. Unless it's something you're thinking about doing in the long term. I don't know if the fitness is going to allow you to go there, but I don't know if you want to go there. I think it works really well, as we've seen, with Joseph as the focal point, Pitti and Barco dropping in behind, and that is a very specific way of playing. It turns into a 3-4-3, honestly. Tito doesn't fit into that. If you're going to play him in this group in a 3-5-2, you're going to play it very, very differently. So if that's something you want to do, this is a game where maybe you can see it. If it's not something you want to do, I don't think you see it. I think you see Tito and Joseph share the minutes. That's going to be the question here, is what's the idea for incorporating Tito Villalba back into this team? What does it look like? Because Tito as a forward instead of Pitti as a forward is very, very, very different.
Let's see. Michael Head. I feel like I should do this almost in a Seinfeld voice.
Go ahead.
What is up with Audi Field's pitch? It looks horrible, especially with the racing stripe down the center of the pitch on the touch lines. Looks absolutely atrocious. It is a new, in all caps, pitch. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts.
It's a year old. So, I mean, it looks bad. They did a lacrosse event there. Is that right?
Did they do PLL there?
I think so. I think they've done some other things there. Hey, guess what? They're going to have XFL there starting in the spring next year. That's going to help, right? Oh,
sure.
Wait, that's not. That's going to make it worse. I don't know. I don't know what the process is. I am not I did not go.
You're
to
not
school.
a horticulturalist?
No, I did not go to school for that, and I don't know why. But the two things that have baffled me there, the quality of the pitch is definitely one. The other one is the sprinklers. Like I heard Joe Tatino and Kevin Hartman on the Galaxy radio broadcast as I was driving home from the Benz, talking about second half where, I mean, you could see almost puddles, and we've talked about being able to see them, and you could see those in Orlando in the past. I think they've gotten it a little more under control. In Orlando, I think their explanation of it more like condensation, where it's not a puddle, I can buy that. I haven't seen it affect the game. DC, it looks like a puddle, and it plays kind of like a puddle, and it splashes kind of like a puddle. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but man, they got to get this figured out because that's not a good look. The racing stripe down the middle is because you had to replace it, just flat out. Like, it would have been worse if you didn't. But man, they've got to get this right. It's way too early in that stadium's lifespan to be having these kind of problems.
Well, I thought you were going to mention the location of the broadcast position that was going to be part of your discussion about what's up with Audi Field, because Joe and Kevin got into that too.
Well, no, we were talking about the pitch. I don't like to throw shade when shade was not asked to be thrown.
ATL UTD fan number one, what are y'all's thoughts on all these late signing announcements far after the deadline? LAFC announced 2 yesterday, and they weren't domestic signings. Hashtag fishy, hashtag MLS rules, hashtag Tuesday thoughts.
The LAFC one, the left back, that came up, I believe, on the deadline day or early the next day, because that had been out there, and it was, for whatever reason, held for an announcement on Monday. That I don't get. That's the part that I'm baffled by. Why do you get the deal done on Wednesday but not announce it until the following Monday? Because it creates questions. It was said Wednesday or Thursday. I'm pretty sure it was early Thursday. They said, look, this deal got in before. Okay, fine. That happened. I mean, a deal getting in before 1 in the morning Eastern time, 10 p.m. Pacific time, and being announced the next morning, I get that. I understand that. But getting in by the deadline, then being announced 24, 48, 96 hours later? Really?
Are you waiting on paperwork?
Why would you be? The deal was done.
Well, no, I mean like trade certificates and things like that, and all
Nobody else
the
did.
visas and things.
Ola Kamara was announced before he had a visa.
I don't know. That's what I said.
Well,
I'm just trying to come up with ideas.
But I'm telling you that that's not true, because Ola Kamara was announced, and Ola Kamara's visa came in yesterday. Stephen Goff at the Washington Post said that he got it at I believe, the consulate in Toronto. So, okay, Ola Kamara was announced, and there you go. I don't know. That consistency is just weird. I don't think it's hashtag MLS rules. I disagree with that. I don't think that's fair. In this one, anyway. What was the other signing LAFC made yesterday? I only remember Diego Palacios, the left back.
Okay, hang on.
The tweet said there were 2. That's the way you read it. I don't know what the other one was.
Unless it's Brian Rodriguez.
That had already been announced.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a little confusion. That had been announced. It was talked about yesterday because I think he was introduced to the media on Sunday. But yeah, that one had been announced, I believe, on Thursday, after the day after the deadline. So I think that one's fine. Well, both of them I think are fine. I just don't know why the announcement was held for 96 hours. That doesn't make any sense.
Marshall Voigt. I'm bored at work and have fallen down a deep transfer market rabbit hole. Transfer marked rabbit hole. During this journey, I stumbled across PT's page. To combat the unfair expectation in all competitions since 2011, PT has only scored 32 goals. Of that, 1 out of 8, so 4 of them, have been scored in Atlanta. Almost a quarter of all of his career assists have come this year in Atlanta.
Pitty, and I've seen people then flip to the other side of it. It's like, oh, well, why was he worth that much money? He's not that good. Pitty is a player, and we see this out of players from Argentina sometimes who have produced to a certain level in that league, and then when they come to MLS, they're expected to be way above and beyond. And I think it's a testament to the quality of MLS that it's not that far off. But Pitty is also more than just goals and assists. And I think we saw enough of that on Sunday, where you saw his overall contribution, and you have a better sense of why he was rated the way he was and why he got called into the Argentine national team. I mean, then the flip side is that you don't get to wear that shirt if you're not a top level performer and top level player. His performances earned that opportunity too. So it's the same with Barco. I mean, I think last year there was so much talk about, well, Barco should be scoring all these goals. Well, he wasn't a goal scorer at Independiente. He was a guy who created goals, but he wasn't a big goal scorer. He scored more goals in Atlanta by far than he scored in minutes played at Independiente. Pitty is about, production-wise, about where he's been. I think he can be a little bit higher. I think he has that in him. I think he can be a guy in this league who is around 10 goals and 12 to 14 assists. And if you get that, combined with everything else that he gives in terms of the build-up, in terms of presence, in terms of beating players on the dribble, in terms of being a threat, you'll take that, and you'll be very, very happy. Stats are not the end-all, be-all in this sport as they are in others. I think it's a little bit harder to quantify some players' contributions, and Pitty's one of those guys. It's a little harder to quantify. I think Barco fits into that too. Like we were talking about with Chris Fuhrmeister, I think one of the things that Barco gives you is the ability to move the defense around. And Miguel gave you that to move them back. Barco gives you that to move them around. And yes, it's okay to go side to side sometimes because it opens up holes. Think back to how many times you see the pattern where Barco picks up the ball to the left side, dribbles across to the right, plays it off. Then if he plays it off to Remedi, to Nagbe, to Gressel, what's their first quick decision to do? Play it back to where Barco came from to Justin Merrim in space. Think back to how often that happens. Barco gives you that, and that doesn't show up in a stat sheet. But Barco can give you that. Pitty can give you that too when he cuts inside and pulls players with him and then either lays it back or delivers a ball like he did to Julian Gressel, that no-look pass down the wing that eliminated two defenders.
Yeah. Daniel Price, who is now working and asking questions simultaneously.
Uh-oh, that's dangerous.
Daniel's concern is, will DeBoer ever get the credit he is due? All of the naysayers will just fall back in the voice of Zlatan. Oh, it's just MLS. Of course he would do good there. It's not like Europe, end quote. DeBoer deserves so much credit for what he's done.
No, and I will go back to something Nick Alifi said on last night's Soccer Over There from the Brew House. A lot of people have dug themselves in on their thoughts on Frank and their opinions on Frank, and these are not new opinions for a lot of people. These are opinions that were formed either at Inter Milan or at Crystal Palace, and they're still clinging, still holding on. Not going to give him the credit. Maybe they're going to be quiet about their opinions, but he's not going to get the credit that he should. And that's a shame because, as we've talked about many times, I feel like he's had a lot of challenges that a lot of other managers in this league would have struggled far more with. And I think all of that work and struggles to get to where you are now have positioned the team as an MLS Cup contender. So I'm happy with the job that's been going on here. But I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves, no.
No, not at all. Shiva, so there is a narrative out there that, quote, FDB finally stepped away from his philosophy, and that's why we're doing better, end quote. I call the narrative being ignorant and ridiculous, but I do want to know, for my own soccer knowledge, What are the
I agree
defensive
with you.
principles that FDB put in place that was different than last year?
That's the thing. It's in general, it's not that different. And this is the thing that just baffles me when we get into this conversation. It's not different than what's been worked on. What was the first thing that Tata Martino worked on at the end of the 2017 season when you had some off-season training because you were eliminated in the knockout round, you had some training sessions. It's a really weird thing that they do where you have these training sessions after the season's over, and generally for a lot of teams it's just come out, knock the ball around, do some media, go home. What did he do? He started working on 3 in the back. Like in November of 17. Defense. 2018. What did he talk about early in the season? A lot. Defense. What did he end up doing at the end of the season when you had the results that you did at the end and you go into the postseason? Defense. You put commitment to defense. So for Frank DeBoer to come in at the very beginning and say that we want to be better defending, that's not a shock. I mean, principles, like what has he done? The formations have changed, and that part of it is not consistent because you've gone from a 4-3-3 idea first to a 3-4-3 to a 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2. For me, what Frank DeBoer has done is something that Pep Guardiola talks about, a lot of managers around the world talk about. I think Jose Mourinho talked about it here recently, and it's funny that Pep and Mourinho are talking about the same thing because they look at the game very different at its core. Pep wants the ball to be able to hurt the opposition. Jose doesn't want the ball because he doesn't want a mistake that can hurt his own team. That part is at the core. Frank is going to be on the side of wanting the ball. But both talked about when you have possession, one thing you're doing is obviously working the ball into opportunities for chances to score goals. The other thing you're doing is positioning your team to be able to deal with transition. And that's something that I think Frank has been really consistent on talking about and working towards. Is he didn't want the team to be as vertical. I know everybody's talked about verticality now. That we started talking about it in the last couple of weeks. That was the biggest difference between Atlanta United this season, earlier especially, a little less now, but it's still less than it was. They're not as vertical. They're not looking to skip the build-up play to just play over the top to play in the other half. Why? Because the faster you go vertical, the faster that ball can come back down your throat. If you go vertical and you're not positioned to deal with losing the ball when you do that, the ball can come straight back down your throat. You're not positioned, goal scored. That's the biggest difference between Tata Martino and Frank DeBoer. Tata wanted to play vertical and play in the other team's half as fast as possible. He tried to find ways to be able to defend and still do that. What Frank has decided to do is what a lot of possession-oriented teams do, which Tata was kind of in between. But it's what a lot of possession teams do, is that you want to build up possession out of the back, and the reason why you want to build up play out of the back is to stay organized. You don't get out of shape that way. You play along, you lose possession, you then try to press to recover it, you have no shape. You get broken down in transition. You build up play, you get your team forward in an organized way, you lose possession, you should have a shape to be able to defend it. And the reason that I stress this in this way is look at the progression for Atlanta United this season. Possession, possession, possession early. Lots of possession. To stay organized. That's the defensive side of the possession. Now as the year's gone on, little more vertical. For example, what was everybody saying this past game about how vertical they were? How it was the old Atlanta United, right?
Yep.
I saw that a bunch of times this past weekend. It was the old Atlanta United. They played less balls vertically than they did last year by about 10. I think they played under 70 passes long passes. It's one way to look at how vertical they are. I'd have to go back and total it. It was under 70. I think it was 62 or 64 if I remember my math in how many long passes they played. Last year they were generally between 75 and 77 long passes played per game. Now, what they did was they completed a far higher percentage in this one than they did last year. It was a little bit better than 50% last year. They were generally completing 33 to 37 long passes per game last year. You got up to 42 in this one. 42 to 44, if I remember my math. You can go back and check me if you need to and tweet at me, but it was more between 42 and 44 is what you completed. Brad Guzan completed a bunch of those, but also Leandro Gonzalez, Perez, and others. So you were more accurate. You didn't play as much volume of being direct and playing vertical, playing long passes. Also, I think more of those long passes now are going side to side, going from one flank to the other than they did in the past. But the reason why you can do that now, you can open it up a little bit more, play a little more vertical. You can also, when you lose possession, press a little bit more in those situations because you're organized defensively. Are we seeing as much? Last year, you think back to games where Atlanta struggled, you had 1v1 opportunities against LGP. You had 1v1 opportunities against Michael Parkhurst. You struggled. One benefit you get this year is Miles Robinson can handle those situations better than either one of those two can. He's a great 1v1 defender. He's fast. He can cover a lot of range. That helps. But also, you're just not seeing as many. Even against teams that are set up to exploit them, like DC, like the Galaxy, like NYC, you're just not seeing as many of those. The reason why? You're organized defensively. You're not in 1v1 situations as much. That's why I said yesterday, and I'll continue to say, I think all that work that Frank did, it was building blocks. It was foundational stuff. It wasn't fun. You never want to focus on defense if you want to score a bunch of goals because it's not as much fun. But is it necessary? Yeah, it is. That's why Pep Guardiola teams early in the season focus a ton on defense. That's why training sessions are focused heavily on defense and position and positional play. You have to be positioned to prepare for when you lose the ball. And that's what DeBoer has done with Atlanta. They are better positioned to deal with when they lose the ball now than they were at the beginning of the season.
Couple more before we go. Four-card Ahmed says, if we see Alejandro Moreno from ESPN FC tomorrow, please let me know. He said yesterday that Atlanta United seems to be in spite of Frank DeBoer. I'd like to give Ali a piece of my mind and a few from my fists.
No.
We don't encourage violence.
No, four-card Ahmed. It's not worth all that nonsense.
But he did ask, do we see George Campbell playing tomorrow? Total bomb. He is on the roster.
Yeah, pretty cool. He's in the Campeones Cup roster. Kevin Kratz is in the Campeones Cup roster as well. George Bello is in there. Brandon Vasquez is not. You have to get it down to 18 for the game day, just like a normal match. So does Campbell end up being in the 18? Who knows? Depending on how the match goes, yeah, it'd be wonderful to see him. It'd be wonderful for him to get that opportunity at the Benz against an opposition like this. But is it possible? Who knows? That's what's so unpredictable about this one and how this game plays out. I'm fascinated by it on the Club America side because they named 3 of their U20 players in the group as well. You'll see 3 guys with 3-digit numbers. That's U20 younger players in their younger teams. They're in the roster anyway. We don't know if they've made the trip. We don't know if they're going to be in the 18. So you're getting a little bit of that from both sides. I'd love to see Campbell. That's a huge ask, but who knows? That's what's weird about this game. It's really hard to get a read on it. I think Atlanta will not start him. I'd be surprised if that's the case, unless you just have guys who need a break and you say, look, this is a reward for what we've seen from you with Atlanta United 2 and your academy work, and we think you're ready for this. And it's a big test, but we think you're ready. I think they'd pair him with Miles Robinson or Michael Parkhurst or Leandro Gonzalez-Perez. I don't think you would go, for example, Pogba and Campbell, although they played a little bit together with Atlanta United 2. That's a huge ask. I think you'd pair him with a first-choice player and see how he gets on. I'm not expecting that, though. When it comes to Moreno, look, Alejandro Moreno said that when Frank de Boer was hired. That's just how people are going to say it. It goes back to the whole respect thing. I just don't think people are giving Frank de Boer enough respect for what he does, and I think other managers get a ton of respect for what they do in similar situations, and it happens. It's not fair, but it happens, and it's how these games get covered sometimes, and I think Frank is on the losing end of that right now, and he shouldn't be, and I hope that he ultimately gets that respect because I think he's done a good job.
Jorge B., are folks getting worried that Atlanta's peaking at the right time? If we stay healthy, this team's extremely dangerous. I want to see if we can keep this current form on the road.
No, I don't think this team's peaking right now. And, I mean, then the flip side is, do you want to intentionally play worse? I don't know how you'd manage that. So they're getting better. They should be. That's good. I think there's things that they can still get better at. You can always get better defensively. You can always eliminate some of these breakdowns when they happen. You can always get better in the attacking side. Could have scored more goals on Sunday. There's always room to improve. But, no, I mean, you just can't control when a team peaks. And I don't think they're peaking. I don't think this is the best that they can play. I think there's still room to improve.
And then the last one in the barn for the morning. Matt Wagner, hashtag Tuesday Thoughts. To your point from earlier today, Gressel and Miram have been given the luxury that they're now able to play forward more. Who or what specifically has been key to making that happen, and what do we need to do to ensure we aren't exploited?
Well, that's back to that organization. I mean, teams are going to try to exploit it, and they should, because you're playing two very attack-minded wingbacks, and they're going to be pushed high. Teams should try to play into those corners more. But it's hard to do when those players that should be pushing into those corners for the opposition are having to drop and defend Gressel and Miram. So they're not there. So then you're asking your forward line to make diagonal runs into those corners. Miles Robinson is one reason you're able to do that, because Miles Robinson can go track a forward into those corners. I thought he did a great job with Antuna, who was trying to do that for the LA Galaxy. I think he did a good job with Castellanos, who was trying to do some of that for NYC, not as much, because NYC really wanted to build up play out of the back, and they tried to, more in the second half, and they did a better job with it. That's one part of it. The organization, just to be able to deal with the play as those guys push forward, that's the biggest part of it. Earlier in the season, the team wasn't organized well enough to be able to be this aggressive pushing forward. Now they are. Miles Robinson's emergence and the team's structure allows it. But you still, look, that's the weak spot. If I'm playing Atlanta United and I see Justin Miram as a left wing back, I want to figure out ways to either get behind him because he's going to give you that opportunity, or to create 1v1s against him because he's not as strong of a defender. So to get behind him, if your right back or your right wing back or whatever your structure is pinned in because Miram is pinning them deep because he's that good going forward, you're not going to be able to do it the easiest way. So the second way would be to consistently ask your forward to make diagonal runs into that space when Miram vacates it when you regain possession, and for your center backs or central midfielders to play long passes into that space to make Miram have to chase back and also pull center backs out. Now then your forward has to win the ball, your forward has to make something happen. But that's one way to do it. The other would be when you build up play and when you get Miram back, and Gressel too, but Miram is less experienced as a wingback. You're going to want to create overloads on that side and give Miram difficult decisions defensively. So you're going to want to force the play to that side and create overloads. You want to get that outside back or that wing back on your side pushing up, overlapping. You want to have one of your creative central midfielders drift over there, even your forward drift over there, and create situations where Merrim is overloaded, and then you pull players away, and then you create space on the backside. When you look at what Atlanta does so well in terms of switching the point of attack side to side and doing it fast now, faster than they have been, it takes advantage of those situations. Other teams need to try to do that to Atlanta to take advantage of these wingbacks. Atlanta defensively has been able to eliminate those opportunities. But that's how they could be attacked. Teams just have to be able to do it and have the quality to do it. There's not many that do.
We have officially caught up with all of everyone's thoughts on a Tuesday, sir.
All right. All kinds of deep Tuesday thoughts. Always fun. Thanks, everybody, for tweeting at us. Thanks for Chris Fuhrmeister for joining us. Follow him at CCFUHR on Twitter. We'll be back tomorrow. Wall Pass Wednesday, Match Day Wednesday. Doug Robertson will join us at 9:30 tomorrow to preview Campeones Cup. Mike Conti will join us at 10 o'clock to preview Campeones Cup. And then we'll be heading down to the Bends. I don't think we will have a traditional tailgate show because midweek tailgate shows are a little difficult to begin with. But we'll throw something together up on the Twitter for you tomorrow afternoon before we head into the Bends. So stay tuned for that. I'm just really fascinated to see what comes out of the press conferences today and how Miguel Herrera and Frank de Boer talk about the match, what they're expecting out of it, what they're looking for out of it. Two teams that are a little more evenly matched than you might think. Club America has made 3 big transfers out this season. It feels kind of like a new group for Miguel Herrera that he is building. They brought in some younger players. They're pushing some players through. They've made, I think, over $30 million in their big sales out this year. They brought Memo Ochoa back, although he is going to be out with an injury, so he will not be here for the match, or at least not play in the match tomorrow night. But they have some other names Atlanta will have to worry about. But they're not quite as dominant as they have been. The balance of power in Mexico has definitely shifted to the north, to Monterrey and to Tigres, their crosstown rivals. Those are your biggest teams in Mexico at this point. Club America is trying to get back to that. So this is a game for them that they're trying to establish themselves as that powerhouse again in this region. So there's a lot on the line in a lot of different ways, a lot of perception things on the line tomorrow night. We'll get you set for the match tomorrow on the show. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Down Here. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata.